The morning my daughter-in-law Daphne locked the back door of my bakery, she was wearing my apron. That detail stayed with me longer than it should have. Not the padlock, a silver one, new enough that the metal still caught the October light, but the apron. Flour stained at the pockets faded from 31 years of use. My name was embroidered on the chest in dark blue thread. Vincent had surprised me with it on our 10th anniversary. "For the woman who makes everything from scratch," the card had said. Daphne stood in the doorway with one hand resting on the new lock and the other smoothing the apron strings. "The health inspector mentioned the back workspace might be a liability," she said, her voice very measured, very reasonable. "Until we do a proper assessment, I think it's better if you don't go in there alone." I was 63 years old. I had been baking in that kitchen since before Aaron was in school. I looked at my name on the apron she was wearing, and I said nothing. I simply turned and walked back to my car. What she didn't know, what she had never bothered to ask, was that Vincent had installed a second entrance to that kitchen 40 years ago. A service door on Arlene Lane, registered with the city, never advertised, never discussed. A door she didn't know existed and had certainly never thought to lock. Before I tell you what I found on the other side of it, please like this video and subscribe if you believe that age does not make a woman invisible in her own life. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? I love knowing how far these stories travel. Because this one matters. Vincent Hartwell and I had come to Hamilton, Ontario, in the spring of 1986 with a second-hand mixer, a lease on a narrow commercial unit on Barton Street, and almost no savings. We had Aaron, who was 4, and slept in a carrier on my back while I kneaded dough. We had each other, which Vincent always said was the most practical asset we owned. The bakery was not beautiful in the beginning. The ceiling tiles were water-stained. The oven ran hot on the left side and not at all on the right. There was one window, and it faced the brick wall of the building next door. Our first week, we sold 11 loaves and a tray of butter tarts. I called my mother in Sudbury and pretended we were doing wonderfully. But Vincent believed in the place the way he believed in most things. Patiently, practically, without any drama. He came home from his shift at the plant every evening and helped me close up. He repaired the oven himself, piece by piece, consulting manuals he borrowed from the library. He painted the front window when we had enough money for paint. He installed a small reading chair near the counter so that elderly customers could sit while they waited, because he had noticed them getting tired standing. "This is a community space," he told me once, sweeping flour off the counter with the same care he gave everything. "It just happens to sell bread." He was right. Over the years, Hartwell's Bakery became the kind of place people in that neighborhood brought their children on Saturday mornings. Families held small celebrations at our counter. A retired notary public named Josephine Park came every Tuesday for 20 years for the same order, rye loaf, half a dozen cinnamon rolls, and stayed an hour longer than necessary because, as she put it, it's the only place in Hamilton where people still talk to each other like they mean it. Josephine became one of my closest friends. She had spent her career in property law before retiring. She knew more about land records and legal filings than anyone I trusted. When Aaron was in his teens, Vincent built the back workspace by hand, a proper production kitchen with a walk-in cooler, a second proofing station, and the service door onto Arlene Lane. The lane was registered as a permanent commercial access route through the city. He had the paperwork filed and certified. I remember him coming home that evening, looking very pleased with himself. "Why do we need the lane registered?" I asked. "Because if anyone ever tries to tell you this building has only one entrance," he said, "they'll be wrong." I had laughed. He was always doing things like that. Small, careful things that didn't make sense until later. When Aaron brought Daphne home for the first time, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked thoughtful questions. She had a natural warmth to her and a quick smile. She said she had always wanted to understand the bakery because it clearly meant so much to the family. She asked about the sourdough starter we had kept alive since 1989. She said she would love to learn to make the butter tarts. I believed her. I wanted to. Over the years, she and Aaron visited regularly. Daphne praised the space. She shared the bakery's photos with her friends. She called the location underrated. Looking back, I understand now that underrated was not a compliment. It was an assessment. Vincent's heart began failing seriously about 5 years ago. The doctors told us what we already knew, that he had spent 40 years ignoring warning signs because stopping was not something he understood how to do. He kept coming to the bakery as long as he could. Toward the end, he sat in the reading chair near the front window and told me what needed doing. I told him nothing needed doing. He said everything needed doing, but that I was capable of handling it all, which I took as both a compliment and an instruction. He died on a Tuesday in November, 3 years ago. The bakery was closed that week. When I reopened the following Monday, Josephine Park was there before I unlocked the front door. She brought tulips and stood beside me at the counter all morning without either of us saying very much. Aaron and Daphne came more often after that. Aaron said I shouldn't be running the place alone. He said the drive from their home was manageable, that they could help on weekends. For a while, that was true. The bakery stayed mine. I still opened at 7, still made the butter tarts from the original recipe, still talked to Josephine on Tuesdays. But Aaron looked tired and Daphne had ideas. She started talking about the brand, the expansion potential, the neighborhood's changing demographics. She used the word positioning more than I found comfortable. "Have you thought about what you'd want to do long-term with the space?" she asked one evening after closing. "I'd want to keep running it," I said. She nodded in a way that suggested she had not actually been asking. The changes came slowly, the way they always do when someone is being careful not to be caught. New signage appeared without discussion. Cleaner, more minimal. The old hand-lettered Hartwell's replaced with something printed and laminated. The reading chair disappeared. When I asked, Daphne said it was a liability hazard. I found it in the back storage room, pushed against the far wall. I moved it back to the front. 2 days later, it was gone from the property entirely. Sunday dinners stopped being regular. Daphne said they were busy. Aaron said they were tired. When Aaron was present, Daphne was different, warmer, more attentive, the version of herself she had shown me at the beginning. When he wasn't there, she moved through the bakery like she was measuring it. One afternoon in late September, I arrived to find a man in a pressed jacket standing near the back workspace, photographing the exterior. He had a tablet and was angling the camera toward the Arlene Lane side of the building. "Can I help you?" I asked. He looked up. "Just doing a routine survey." "For whom?" Before he could answer, Daphne appeared from inside. "He's with a property management company," she said. "We're looking into some upgrades." "What kind of upgrades?" "Structural assessments. Nothing for you to worry about." That phrase, "nothing for you to worry about," had started appearing in her vocabulary with some regularity. It is the kind of phrase people use when they are hoping you will not ask the next question. I asked it anyway. "Is this about the building itself?" "It's about improving things," she said, and guided the man gently back inside. That evening, I found a folder on the counter that Daphne had left behind, partially open. The name on the tab read Barton Street Redevelopment. Preliminary consultation. I didn't touch it. I stood there and read what I could see from the outside. The words commercial lot assessment and estimated resale value were visible on the top page. I went home and called Josephine Park. "Come over tomorrow," she said. "Bring whatever you have." Josephine sat across from me at her dining room table the next morning and listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her cup. "Go to the city planning office," she said. "Request every filing associated with that address from the last 2 years." "Can she do anything without my signature?" Josephine's expression answered before she did. "Not legally. But people who intend to do things illegally don't usually announce it in advance." I went the following morning. The clerk handed me a folder thicker than I expected. I sat at a corner table and opened it. The first pages were familiar. The original commercial lease conversion, the zoning records, Vincent's service lane registration. Then I reached documents filed 9 weeks earlier, a preliminary development consultation, referencing the property, and at the bottom of the page, my signature. That was not my signature. The shape was similar. Someone had studied it carefully, But the pressure was wrong. The loop on the capital letter was closed too tightly. I had been signing my name for 63 years. I knew exactly what it looked like. My hands were very still as I photographed every page. I called Josephine from the parking lot. "They've already filed something," I said. "A preliminary development consultation. My name's on it." A pause. "Did you sign it?" "No." "Then we have a problem," she said, "and we need to move carefully." That evening I drove past the bakery without stopping. Through the front window I could see Daphne on her phone, pacing near the counter. She was not relaxed. I parked on Arlene Lane and sat for a moment. The service door was visible from where I was. Old wood painted years ago, the hinges dark with age. I hadn't used it in over 2 years. I got out of the car. The key was on my regular keyring where it had always been. Vincent had insisted. "Because someday you'll want to come in the back way," he'd said, "and you won't want to go looking for the key." The lock turned on the second try. The door opened without resistance. I stepped into the back workspace. It smelled the same. Flour and old wood, and the faint sweetness that never quite leaves walls after 31 years of baking. I stood there for a moment. Then I looked at what Daphne had been doing in here. Boxes I didn't recognize were stacked neatly in the corner. I opened the nearest one. Inside were printed contracts, architectural renderings, and financial projections. The cover page read, Phase 1 Redevelopment. Barton Street Mixed-Use Complex. A condominium tower. Retail units at grade. The bakery and the buildings on either side erased. Separate folders held documents with my name on them. Letters of intent, preliminary authorizations, a draft transfer agreement. None of them were signed by me. I photographed everything. I worked quickly and quietly. As I reached for the last folder, I saw something I hadn't expected. A binder set apart from the rest, older, the spine worn. I recognized it immediately. Vincent's operations binder. The one he had kept since we opened, full of handwritten notes, supplier contacts, and what he called the terms of things. I had looked for it after he died and assumed it had been misplaced. It had not been misplaced. I opened it to the last section, where his handwriting shifted from practical notes to something more personal. A page dated 18 months before he died. Daphne asks about the property more than is natural. She asks about value, not history. There is a difference, and she knows which one she means. I turned the page. I have made arrangements. Josephine has copies. The service lane is legally protected and cannot be restricted by any future occupant or owner. The bakery is held in a trust structure that requires both Aaron and Christine to agree to any sale or transfer. Christine must be involved. She cannot be bypassed. My name written in his handwriting. Not my wife. My name because he wanted it to be clear. If she reads this, the final entry said, it means I was right to worry. And if I was right to worry, she must not stay quiet. She has more protection than she knows. I sat on the edge of the workbench for a long moment. Then I put the binder in my bag, locked the service door behind me, and drove straight to Josephine's house. She read the entries in silence. When she finished, she looked up. He set up a trust. That's what it says. He mentioned a lawyer once. Ms. Adeze Okafor on Locke Street. Josephine nodded. Call her first thing tomorrow. And Christine, stop letting Daphne see when you're upset. She's reading your reactions. Ms. Adeze Okafor had practiced property law for 22 years and had the manner of someone who had heard a great deal and been surprised by very little. She confirmed everything. The property was held in a family trust. I was the primary trustee. Aaron was the secondary. No sale, transfer, or development agreement could proceed without my explicit written consent. And if someone files documents with my name without my consent? I asked. That's fraud, she said simply. We pursue it accordingly. She also confirmed the service lane registration. Vincent had included a clause preventing any future development on the Barton Street property from blocking or eliminating that lane without city approval and trustee consent. Daphne hadn't just been unaware of the service door. She couldn't legally touch it. She's moving quickly, I told Miss Okafor. Aaron comes home Friday. I think she's planning something for the weekend. Miss Okafor set down her pen. Then we don't wait until Monday. We spent the next 2 hours preparing. She pulled the certified trust documents, the forged filing comparisons, a summary letter from the city confirming the lane registration. She contacted the fraud review division at the city planning office. "What I want," I said, "is for this to happen where Aaron can see it, not in private where she can explain it away. He needs to see it." Miss Okafor looked at me carefully. "That's a harder approach." "I know." "Are you certain?" "Vincent spent 40 years building something that mattered to this neighborhood," I said. "I am not going to let it disappear quietly." She nodded once. "Then we'll be ready." I did not confront Daphne. I went back to my apartment above the bakery, sat at the kitchen table, and wrote everything down. Not because I needed to remember it, because putting it on paper made it feel solid. On Thursday afternoon, my granddaughter, Willa, knocked on my door. She was 14. And she had her grandfather's eyes and her father's habit of getting straight to the point. She sat down across from me and looked at me the way teenagers do when they are deciding whether to say something that will change everything. "Grandma," she said, "can I tell you something?" "Yes." "I was at the house last night, and Mum was on the phone with someone after Dad went to bed." She paused. "She said the papers were almost ready. She said Dad would sign Friday and that you wouldn't be an issue." "You wouldn't be an issue?" I looked at her carefully. "Did she say what he was signing?" "Something about the bakery property." She called it a restructuring. Willa twisted her fingers together. "Is she trying to sell it?" "I think she may be trying to, yes." She was quiet for a moment. "She's my mum," she said. "I know. But it's your bakery." "Yes." She thought about what came next with a seriousness I recognized. "I think the truth being hard is better than a lie being easy," she said finally. "Dad always says that." "He learned it from his father." On Friday evening, Aaron came home. Daphne had arranged a meeting at the bakery. She had told him it was an investor presentation, a potential partnership, something about expanding the brand. He texted to ask if I would be there. I told him yes. I arrived at Barton Street at 7:15. Through the front window, I could see a small group, a man in a gray suit holding a folder, a woman in a dark blazer beside him, and Daphne moving through the space as though she had owned it for years. Aaron stood near the front counter with a coffee cup, looking slightly uncertain in the way he always did when he didn't fully understand what was being asked of him. I went around to Arlene Lane. The service door opened on the first try. I moved through the back workspace and came into the front of the bakery through the internal production hallway, stepping into the room quietly. For a moment, no one noticed. Then Daphne turned. The look on her face lasted only a second before she controlled it. "Christine," she said, "I didn't know you were coming." "I didn't think I needed to announce myself," I said. "This is my bakery." The man in the gray suit, I later learned his name was Barrett Lyle, from a Toronto development firm, glanced between us. "I'm sorry, are you the owner?" "I am. Christine Hartwell, primary trustee of the Hartwell Family Property Trust." Daphne's expression shifted. "Christine, this isn't the moment to—" "Is there a better moment?" I asked. "Because I've been waiting for one and it doesn't seem to be arriving." Aaron set down his coffee cup. "Mum, what's going on?" I placed a folder in front of Barrett Lyle. "These are the certified trust documents for this property, including the clause requiring trustee consent for any sale, transfer, or development agreement." He picked it up and read in silence. The woman in the dark blazer moved closer. "There is also a preliminary development filing at the city planning office," I continued. "Submit 9 weeks ago with my name on it. I did not sign that document. This is a certified comparison prepared by a property lawyer." I placed the second folder on the counter. The room was completely still. Barrett Lyle looked at Daphne. "You represented that ownership was clear." "It is clear," she said quickly. "This is a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding," Aaron said. His voice was quiet. He was looking at the documents in Barrett Lyle's hands. "Mum, is that really not your signature?" "It is not," I said. Aaron turned to Daphne. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Something left her face. Not guilt exactly, but the weight of whatever had been holding her composure together. "I was trying to fix things," she said finally. "What things?" Aaron asked. We're in debt, Aaron. I've been in debt for 2 years, and I didn't want you to know because I thought I could handle it. The property, your mother's property, it's worth nearly $4 million in this market. I thought if we could move the process forward, I could cover it before it became a problem. You thought you could sell my mother's bakery to pay your debts, he said. She didn't answer. Willa spoke from the doorway. She had followed me in, or perhaps she had come on her own. I wasn't certain, and later she wouldn't say. She was holding her phone. Mom, she said, I need to tell you something. Daphne looked at her daughter. I recorded Thursday night's phone call, Willa said. When you told whoever you were talking to that Dad would sign and that Grandma wouldn't be an issue. She pressed play. Daphne's voice came through the speaker, clear and unhurried. Aaron will sign Friday. He doesn't need to know the full details. And Christine, she won't be a problem. She's not paying attention. No one in the room spoke. Barrett Lyle closed the folder and looked at his colleague. We need to withdraw. She was already gathering her papers. The preliminary filings will need to be reviewed, Barrett Lyle said to no one in particular. I'll be making a report to the city planning office. He left without looking at Daphne. Aaron sat down on the stool behind the counter, the same stool he had sat on as a small boy while Vincent and I worked. He put his head in his hands for a moment. Then he looked up at me. I'm sorry, Mum. You didn't know, I said. I should have been paying more attention. Yes, I said, you should have. That was the truth. It wasn't said unkindly, but it was said plainly, and he received it the same way. Daphne remained near the display cases. She was very still, and the confidence she had moved through the room with 20 minutes earlier had left her completely. What remained looked smaller and more ordinary, not a villain. Just someone who had made a desperate choice under pressure, and kept making worse ones to cover the first. I'm going to need legal advice, she said quietly. Yes, I agreed, you are. She looked at me. Are you going to press charges? I thought about Vincent. About the trust structure he had quietly built while I wasn't watching. About the service door he had registered with the city because he wanted to make sure I could always get in. About the binder he had kept so that someone who knew the law, Josephine, or whoever came after, would be able to find it when the time came. Because he knew something I hadn't learned yet, that a home, a business, a lifeless work cannot be protected by trust alone. I'm going to do what the law allows, I said. Beyond that, I haven't decided. That was honest. There are processes underway, the fraud review, the document examination. Miss Okafor is handling it methodically. I leave the legal questions to people who understand them better than I do. What I know is this. 8 weeks after that evening, the bakery is still open. The reading chair is back near the front window. Josephine Park came in on Tuesday for her rye loaf and cinnamon rolls and stayed an hour and 40 minutes. Aaron comes on Saturdays. We don't talk about everything yet. Some of it is still too close. But he comes, and he works, and he has started learning to make the butter tarts, something he had never made time for before. The service door on Arlene Lane is oiled now and working perfectly. I use it sometimes, not because I need to, but because it was something Vincent built for me, and I don't want to forget it's there. He built a great many things quietly, over the years. For a long time I thought the most important ones were visible. The oven he repaired, the walls he painted, the chair he placed by the window for the customers who needed to sit. But the most important thing he built was the one no one else knew about. Not a door. Not a lane registration. Not a legal trust, though all of those mattered. The belief that I was still capable of standing my ground when someone tried to take what was mine. That was always there. I just had to walk through the right door to find it again. So I want to ask you, if you had been in my place, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace? Or would you have walked through that back door? Do you think Aaron deserved a second chance? And what do you believe should happen to someone who uses the people they love as instruments? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story reminded you of your own strength, of a line you once held or wish you had, please like this video and subscribe. Because these are not just stories. They are reminders that it is never too late to know your own door.